Imagine standing on the edge of a vast, storm-ridden ocean. The waves crash violently, the wind howls, and the ground beneath your feet trembles as though the earth itself were uncertain of its own existence. Now imagine that this storm is not outside of you but within you. An unrelenting tempest of thought, fear, anger, and doubt. Most people spend their lives tossed around by these inner storms, never realizing that calmness, like the eye of the hurricane, is always present at the center. The paradox is cruelly simple. The harder you fight the storm, the stronger it becomes. The calmer you become, the less power it has over you. Why, then, do we spend our lives enslaved to circumstances and emotions, when serenity is always one breath away? Perhaps because silence terrifies us more than chaos. The mind craves noise. It thrives on stimulation, drama, and the compulsive need to label, judge, and react. A single insult from a stranger lingers in our chest for years. A single failure becomes an anchor that drags us beneath the waves of self-doubt. And yet, if you trace these storms back to their source, they do not come from the world itself. They come from the way we interpret the world. Carl Jung once observed, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The storms we battle are not accidents of destiny, but echoes of our own unconscious mind. They are rehearsed reactions, conditioned responses, the inertia of unresolved conflicts and untamed desires. To train the mind to be calm is not to suppress these storms, nor to flee from them. It is to see them clearly, without judgment, until their ferocity dissolves into stillness. But the question arises, how do we do this? How do we, in a world where every notification, every headline, every crisis demands our panic, train the mind to stand unmoved, as a mountain amid shifting clouds? It begins with awareness, a piercing awareness that does not condemn but simply observes. You cannot control the storm you refuse to acknowledge. When anger rises, most people either lash out or bury it deep within, only for it to reappear with greater force. Calmness requires a third path, witnessing the anger without fusing with it. To say, "There is anger in me," rather than "I am angry." That single shift in language reveals an ancient truth. Emotions are visitors, not permanent residents. And yet, awareness is only the first step. The deeper practice lies in reorienting our relationship to suffering. We live in denial of pain, chasing pleasure and avoiding discomfort at all costs. But if calmness is to endure, it must not be fragile. It must not depend on everything going right. True serenity is forged in the crucible of hardship, when we learn to endure suffering without letting it corrupt our inner balance. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." If our mind is anchored in meaning, no storm, no matter how violent, can uproot us. This first truth may unsettle you. Calmness is not the absence of struggle. It is the presence of strength. The storm will not cease because you wish it to. The world will not bend itself to your desires. But within you lies a power greater than any circumstance, the ability to choose how you respond. That choice, repeated again and again, is how you begin to train your mind to be calm in every situation. Most unrest within the human mind begins with a single assumption, that we can or should control life. We cling to people as if they will never leave, to wealth as if it cannot vanish overnight, to health as if our bodies were immune to time. But control is the grand illusion. Reality is in constant flux. Relationships dissolve, fortunes evaporate, bodies fail. The tighter we cling, the more violent our despair when the inevitable occurs. Calmness does not grow in the soil of control. It grows in the soil of surrender. Yet, surrender does not mean resignation. It is not passively submitting to fate. It is the courage to recognize reality as it is, not as we wish it to be. To resist reality is to endlessly battle against the tide. To accept it is to learn how to swim with the current, conserving energy, finding balance. The paradox is this: the moment you release the illusion of control, you gain real control, not over life itself, but over your mind's relationship to life. Think of the last time you felt frustration rise in you. Perhaps someone spoke harshly to you. In that moment, the mind rushed to resist. This should not be happening. They should not be speaking this way. I should not feel this insult. Notice the pattern. The word should is the birthplace of inner conflict. The mind erects a version of reality it demands, then crashes when reality refuses to comply. Every should is a seed of suffering. Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher of pessimism, understood this well. A man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. We are not the authors of the world, nor even of the impulses within us. We may act, but we do not choose the desires that move us to act. Recognizing this strips away the arrogance of control and replaces it with humility. Calmness arises naturally when we stop demanding that life bend to us and instead learn to bend with it. But what does this bending look like in practice? It is the art of response over reaction. When the unexpected strikes, a betrayal, a failure, a loss, the untrained mind reacts instantly, like a spark igniting dry wood. Words are spoken in anger, decisions are made in fear, and later regret arrives like ash after fire. The trained mind, however, holds the spark before it touches the wood. It pauses, examines, and decides. Is this flame worth feeding, or should it be extinguished before it consumes me? This pause is not weakness, it is strength in its highest form. To pause in the heat of the moment is to assert mastery over one's inner world. It is the practice of patience, the space where calmness takes root. Imagine a warrior who enters battle not with wild fury, but with a quiet mind and steady breath. Such a warrior does not waste energy striking blindly, nor does he let his opponent dictate his moves. He responds with precision. The battlefield is life itself, and the calm mind is the one that survives. But this kind of calmness is not achieved overnight. It must be trained like a muscle. Each moment of irritation is an opportunity. Each disappointment is a lesson. Calmness grows through repetition. The decision, again and again, not to be enslaved by reaction. As we move deeper, we begin to see that calmness is not merely about managing emotions, but about restructuring perception itself. To change how you see reality is to change the power it holds over you. And so, in the next movement of this exploration, we must turn to perception, the lens of the mind, and ask, can serenity be cultivated not by changing the world, but by transforming the way we look at it? The world is not what it is what you perceive it to be. Two people can witness the same event, hear the same words, and yet walk away carrying entirely different realities. One sees insult, the other sees indifference. One sees tragedy, the other sees a lesson. What changed? Not the event itself, but the lens through which it was interpreted. Calmness, then, does not come from perfect circumstances, but from a disciplined perception. Think of the mind as a house of mirrors. Each mirror reflects reality, but each one is curved, distorted by memory, fear, and desire. If you believe the reflection without question, you will forever be lost in illusions, chasing what isn't there, fleeing from what doesn't exist. To train the mind to be calm is to polish the mirror, to strip away distortion until reality is seen with clarity. Aldous Huxley once remarked, "Experience is not what happens to you. It's what you do with what happens to you." This is the heart of perception. Life will hand you storms, betrayals, and failures, but you decide whether they become wounds or wisdom. Calmness arises when you take ownership of interpretation. The raw event may be brutal, but the story you weave around it is where suffering or serenity takes root. Consider a practical example. Imagine losing your job. The untrained mind might instantly declare, "This is disaster. My worth is gone. I am powerless." Panic follows, and calmness evaporates. The trained mind pauses, then reframes, "This is difficult, yes, but perhaps it is also a doorway. Perhaps life is pushing me toward growth I would never have chosen on my own." The situation has not changed, but perception has. From perception, calmness flows. Yet this reorientation does not come easily. The human brain is wired for negativity, an evolutionary inheritance from ancestors who survived by expecting threats. A rustle in the grass was assumed to be a predator, not the wind, because those who erred on the side of caution lived to pass on their genes. But this survival mechanism, once vital, now poisons our modern lives. We magnify threats, exaggerate failures, and anticipate catastrophe. Calmness demands that we dismantle this default programming, that we cultivate a new habit, deliberate conscious reframing. How does one practice this? Begin with small irritations, a delayed train, a rude cashier, a sudden change of plans. Instead of reacting with frustration, practice viewing the event as neutral, a blank canvas on which your mind is free to paint. Ask yourself, what meaning am I assigning here? Could I choose another? This self-inquiry, repeated consistently, begins to reshape the architecture of the mind. Over time, calmness ceases to be an effort and becomes a reflex. Just as a musician no longer thinks of each note, but lets the music flow, the trained mind reframes without conscious strain. What once caused turmoil now barely stirs the surface of your being. The storm still rages, but you no longer identify with the storm, you identify with the stillness beneath it. Jean-Paul Sartre captured this tension when he declared, "Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you. The world will impose itself on you with indifference, sometimes cruelty. But perception is your domain, your unassailable freedom. To train your mind for calmness is to guard that freedom fiercely, refusing to let the external dictate the internal. And yet, perception alone is not enough. To truly deepen calmness, one must move beyond the mind's stories into the body, into breath, into the rhythm of existence itself. For perception can reframe reality, but embodiment anchors you within it. This is where calmness descends from an idea into lived experience. The mind is not a floating entity detached from the body. It is woven into every breath, every heartbeat, every subtle vibration of our nervous system. When fear strikes, the body trembles. When anger surges, the jaw clenches, the chest tightens, the fists curl. Emotions are not abstract, they are embodied storms. To train the mind to be calm, you must train the body to become a sanctuary instead of a battlefield. Notice what happens in panic. Breathing becomes shallow, quick, erratic. The body prepares for war, flooding itself with adrenaline and cortisol, as though survival depends on immediate action. But often, no predator is chasing you. No cliff edge looms before you. The body has mistaken thought for reality. In that moment, calmness feels impossible, not because the situation is unbearable, but because the body has been hijacked. The nervous system, untrained, drags the mind into chaos. The path out begins with breath. For centuries, sages and philosophers across traditions pointed to the breath as the anchor of serenity. Why? Because it is both unconscious and conscious. It happens on its own, yet you can guide it. To breathe deeply and slowly is to whisper to your body, "You are safe." And as the body softens, the mind follows. Viktor Frankl, who endured the horrors of concentration camps, taught us, between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. That space, fragile and fleeting, can be widened through the discipline of breath. Each inhale becomes a reminder that you are more than your fear. Each exhale becomes a release of tension, a conscious letting go of what you cannot control. But embodiment is more than breathing. It is the practice of returning the mind to the immediacy of the body, to the present moment that thought so often abandons. Notice the weight of your feet pressing against the ground. Feel the rhythm of your pulse. Become aware of the air moving across your skin. These are not trivial sensations, they are anchors. The storm may rage in your head, but your body is always here, now. To return to it is to return to calmness. Consider this: when grief overwhelms you, thought multiplies suffering. You replay the loss, imagine different outcomes, spiral into the future. But if you bring awareness to the body, the heaviness in the chest, the tears rolling down, you discover that grief is not unbearable in its raw form. It is the mind's endless elaboration that crushes you. Embodiment strips away the stories and grounds you in the simple reality of feeling. And feeling, when allowed fully, always moves, always passes. To embody calmness is also to move deliberately. Modern life demands constant haste. We eat quickly, speak quickly, walk quickly. Our bodies rush even when there is no need. This rushing feeds anxiety, teaching the nervous system to live in perpetual urgency. To slow your movements is to send a countersignal. There is no emergency here. Try lifting a glass of water slowly, eating a meal without hurry, walking with measured steps. These small acts are radical rebellions against the culture of speed, and in them, calmness takes root. Through breath, through presence, through slowness, you discover that calmness is not something to be created. It is something revealed. It is always there, beneath the agitation, waiting to be uncovered. Embodiment teaches you that serenity is not an idea to be chased but a state already within reach. And yet, embodiment alone cannot sustain you if your inner world is filled with unresolved shadows. The body may relax, the breath may steady, but the unconscious will still whisper, still stir the waters. To deepen calmness fully, we must venture into the darker territory of the self. Our hidden fears, our suppressed desires, the shadows we avoid. Only there can we discover whether calmness is fragile performance or unshakable truth. Calmness that avoids discomfort is not calmness at all. It is merely repression disguised as serenity. Many people attempt to quiet their minds by denying what stirs within them. They meditate only to silence pain. They pray only to escape fear. They distract themselves with pleasures in the hope that sorrow will vanish. But shadows do not disappear when ignored. They deepen. The mind cannot be truly calm until it learns to embrace the very forces it fears. Carl Jung named this hidden terrain the shadow, the repressed desires, memories, and impulses that dwell in the unconscious. These are the parts of ourselves we disown. The anger we refuse to admit, the envy we mask with politeness, the wounds we bury so deeply that even we forget they exist. Yet they remain, shaping our thoughts, distorting our perceptions, fueling our storms. A man who insists he is never angry will erupt in rage at trivial things. A woman who claims she has no fear will find herself paralyzed by indecision. The denied self becomes the saboteur. To train the mind for calmness, we must make peace with this shadow. We must turn toward the darkness, not as enemies, but as forgotten companions. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Calmness, then, is not fragile positivity. It is wholeness. It is the ability to sit with anger without being consumed, to face fear without collapsing, to acknowledge sorrow without drowning. How do we practice this? Begin with radical honesty. When agitation rises, ask yourself, what is the truth beneath this reaction? Anger often hides hurt. Jealousy often hides insecurity. Anxiety often hides the need for control. To acknowledge the root is to strip the storm of its disguise. Naming what you feel is the first act of courage. Next comes compassion. The shadow is not an enemy to be destroyed, but a child to be understood. When you discover envy in your heart, do not lash yourself with guilt. Instead, listen. What is this envy revealing about what I truly long for? When you feel rage, do not suppress it blindly. Ask, what boundary was crossed that I failed to defend? In this way, the shadow becomes a guide, leading you toward the neglected corners of your being. And as you integrate these hidden parts, calmness deepens. It is no longer the brittle calmness of denial, easily shattered by confrontation, but the resilient calmness of authenticity. You cannot be shaken by insults when you have already befriended your own flaws. You cannot be blackmailed by fear when you have already walked into your inner darkness. The world loses its leverage over you when you accept yourself fully. Consider the example of grief. Many flee from grief because it threatens to consume them. But those who face it discover that, while grief is heavy, it also carries a strange clarity. In grief, one learns what truly matters, what illusions fall away. Calmness here does not mean the absence of tears, but the presence of a quiet acceptance that even sorrow belongs to the fullness of life. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." Calmness is not the elimination of chaos, but its integration. When you hold chaos without fear, you discover a stillness that no storm can fracture. This is the depth of inner calm, a calmness not built on control, but on wholeness. And yet, to live this fully, calmness must not remain personal. It must extend outward into relationships, into society, into the very way we move through the world. The final stage of training the mind to be calm lies in learning how serenity is expressed not only inwardly, but outwardly, in action, in speech, in presence. Calmness, once cultivated within, cannot remain hidden. Like a still lake reflecting the sky, serenity in the mind begins to mirror itself in action, in speech, in the very energy one carries into the world. The final stage of training the mind to be calm is to embody it outwardly, not as performance but as natural expression. The world is a storm of agitation, and those who walk with unshakable calmness become rare beacons, anchors in the chaos. Think of those individuals you have encountered who seem unmoved even in crisis. When others panic, they breathe steadily. When others shout, they speak with measured words. When others rush, they act with patience. These people do not calm situations by force. They calm them by presence. Their stillness is contagious. Just as fear spreads from one trembling voice to another, so too does serenity ripple outward, steadying hearts without a single command. This outward calm, however, is not about withdrawal from the world. It is not the calmness of indifference or detachment, but of deep engagement without being consumed. To remain calm while active, to enter the marketplace, the battlefield, the home filled with conflict, and still remain rooted, is the true mastery. Anyone can feel calm in solitude, far from human noise. But calmness proven in the furnace of relationship, responsibility, and crisis, that is the calmness that transforms lives. Jean-Paul Sartre reminded us, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." If calmness is trained within but never lived without, it remains incomplete, an unrealized potential. You make yourself through your choices, and the choice to act calmly in a turbulent world is one of the highest expressions of strength. But what does this look like in practice? Consider conflict. Most arguments escalate not because of the content of disagreement, but because of tone, reactivity, and defensiveness. A calm presence refuses to feed the fire. By listening instead of interrupting, by pausing instead of retaliating, by choosing words carefully rather than impulsively, you change the entire temperature of the room. Calmness becomes not a shield only for yourself, but a gift you extend to others. Or think of leadership. A leader driven by panic spreads panic to the group. A leader grounded in calmness inspires trust. In moments of crisis, people rarely remember the exact words spoken, but they never forget the presence of calm in the one they followed. Calmness becomes authority without domination, guidance without coercion. Even in daily life, the outward expression of calm has power. Imagine entering a crowded, impatient space, a grocery line, a traffic jam. Instead of joining the collective agitation, you remain patient, soft in demeanor, steady in breath. You shift the energy not by demanding peace, but by embodying it. Those around you may not even know why they feel slightly lighter, but your calmness has already done its quiet work. And there lies the ultimate paradox. Calmness, which begins as an inner refuge, ends as an act of service. The storm you master within yourself becomes a shelter for others caught in their storms. Your stillness ripples outward, carrying strength to those who cannot yet find it within. Arthur Schopenhauer once observed, "Compassion is the basis of morality. To live with calmness in the world is, in essence, to live with compassion." For what greater compassion exists than to meet another's turmoil not with judgment, not with retaliation, but with steadiness that says, "Here, in this presence, you are safe." The journey, then, circles back to its beginning. Calmness is not an escape from storms, nor a denial of chaos. It is the eye of the hurricane, the unmovable center, the quiet power that transforms suffering into strength. To train your mind to be calm in every situation is to claim your birthright as a human being capable of freedom, resilience, and love. And when this calmness shines through you, it does more than steady your own life. It illuminates the path for others.